Hello, hello. My name is Allie, and I want to welcome you to this Monday's paint along. So if you're new here, I do these live paint along demos every Monday at 5 Eastern. And it's free to watch, and many of you do that. And I also offer a download of the outlines, and there are a lot of people that paint right along with me. So the download has outlines that look like this that you can trace onto your panel, and then I just have you paint over them and kind of get up to speed. And then we start the demo, which is where we're at right now. Hi Dawn, nice to see you. I see everybody kind of dropping in here. Please feel free to jump into the comments and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from. Everybody always likes to see, we have people all over the world who join us every week. Hi Helen. For these paint-alongs, and I want to say a special welcome if you were at the Four Bridges Art Fair this weekend and I met you in person. I invited a lot of new paint-along friends who were at the art fair, and gosh, it was such a great weekend. We had 3 beautiful days, and it was really nice to get out and see people in person again. And it was relatively safe, being mostly outdoors. So. Hi Tina in Virginia and Diane in New Zealand. Yeah, we have people all over. Okay, cool. Well, I like seeing all you guys dropping into the comments. And Betty in Florida. Hi Betty. All right, let's get started, okay? So this is actually the last of the landscape series. So we're just doing 4 in this series. This is the 4th one. If you missed the other ones, you can still watch those as a replay. And I should mention that this video is always available as a replay after. So if you're watching this, you're just getting started, you want to paint along with me after you get the download on my website, you can definitely do that. So this will be on my Facebook page, and I post it to my YouTube channel on Tuesdays. So you can watch all the old paint-alongs too. I think there's about 25 of them by now. So yeah, we have a lot. Okay, so here is the image. This is the Rustic barn paint-along. I'm gonna bring the camera in here so that you can see what we're doing here. I always try to adjust it so that you can see both my palette and the image. Maybe we want to bring it down just a little bit there. That looks pretty good. I think you guys can see everything. I noticed that sometimes these videos actually get cropped down a little bit. So sometimes I have to apologize. Like sometimes I can see the reference image and I think that you can too. And sometimes it gets cropped off a little bit. So hopefully we're all good right now. Looks like it's pretty good. Yeah, and I like for you to be able to see my palette. So as I mentioned, if you've got your outlines, you trace them onto your panel using some transfer paper, or sometimes people just like color the back of the sheet and transfer those lines, and then we just paint over them using a skinny little script liner brush like this. And we make just kind of a light grayish purple. And that color really doesn't matter because we're gonna layer everything on top of this. So all these outlines are pretty much going to get covered up. And I like to always mention we are using golden fluid acrylics, or at least that's what I'm using. And with the download, I include a list of all the paint colors that I use. But if you don't have these, you're more than welcome to work with what you have on hand. Hi Hanny in Holland. We have people all over today. I love it. That's great. Okay, so this is an 8x10 panel. It is kind of small for a full landscape, but we're going to really simplify these forms. So we're not going to get into all these little details. We're going to look for the big shapes. So the first stage that I like to do is to just kind of start looking for the shadows. So if you've watched my demos before, you know this is kind of how I start everything, whether I'm painting a person or flowers or a barn. I kind of approach it the same way. I'm going to make a purple from Payne's Gray and Alizarin Crimson. I'm gonna water it down really nice. So it's nice and thin and it flows. And I'm just going to start looking for the large shapes of shadow. So I'm not paying attention to the colors. I'm just basically making a monochromatic painting to start out with. So we have this post right here that's in the foreground that's pretty dark. So I'm going to start right there and just put a wash in. We've got that outlined. And then I also have this large dark shape of trees in the background. So I'm gonna wash that in, but we've got our sun right there that's outlined, and that of course is shooting light out. But I'm not going to paint around all these rays because that is gonna get to be too much and a bit overwhelming. So I'm just going to kind of lightly go around like that and leaving some area for those rays to pierce through. And since we're going to come back over this with a lot more color that's going to be opaque, we can bring those highlights in over this clump of trees. We're just kind of building up a base right now. But that is the very brightest spot on our painting, so we're going to leave like that sun really white. And definitely, guys, if you have any questions, I am trying to peek back at the comments. They do kind of scroll through pretty quickly on my end, so if I miss any of them, I always make a point to go back and answer any of those questions afterwards that I just type into the comments. Okay, so we've got that span of trees kind of cutting across here. And now if we squint, we can see that the top half of the silo is pretty dark. So I'm not paying any attention to the details of the silo, which I kind of lightly indicated, but I'm just gonna put this in. And now here's the thing though, once it goes in front of the background, it flips, and the silo is actually lighter than the background behind it. So I'm just gonna kind of let this trail off. I'm not going to continue all the way down, making that real dark. I'm gonna water it down a little bit more and just put like a light wash down here. But it's the darkest up at the top. I might even go back and push that a little bit darker. I think I saw Janet in there. Hi, Janet. Hi, Julie. Julie's asking, is that Payne's Gray? It's Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson, Julie. That's kind of my go-to recipe for these shadows that I put down in the beginning. Just makes kind of a nice dark muted purple. Okay, so we've got a dark bit here where, you know what, I'm just gonna go over the whole barn. It's all kind of a bit dark. I'm gonna put all that in that first wash. Not the roof though, because the roof's pretty bright right here. But this first wash, I'm just gonna do that all dark over the barn. We'll separate some more of those details in the next wash of color. Right now we're just kind of generalizing the forms. Basically we're like picking the darkest half of the forms and we're just washing over those. Just simplifying as we go. Okay, we've got a little post that's there. We're gonna leave that a little bit lighter just to separate it. Then we've got a dark post right here. I'm gonna wash that in. I'm using flat tip brushes, guys. This is a #1. This is a Royal Langnickel brush. I'm really not picky about the brand of brushes. I haven't really found a brand that I think is perfect, but I do like a nice clean flat tip. Hi, Amy. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so right here, the sky is pretty dark. So I am gonna wash that in. I'm not the sky, I'm sorry. The roof is kind of dark right here. So I'm gonna wash that in with some color coming down. Okay, great. So continuing to look around, and we've got this little pass of kind of the edge of a pathway here that is in shadow. So it's kind of cutting through right here. I'm gonna put that in. You can see that kind of the edge of all that grass and stuff. We're just gonna wash that in. And then if I squint, this little stretch of land, I'm gonna water my paint down just a bit more, is a little bit darker than what's in front of it. So I'm just gonna water that down. You know, in fact, I'm just gonna do this whole chunk because I'm gonna separate these two when I start adding the color. So we're just gonna do that whole chunk a little bit darker. Okay, then down at the bottom, we've got some shadow. We've got like these, you know, the hay field here that's kind of tall, and so it's in shadow right here, and we see this area up close a little bit more. So we're just gonna put that shadow in. We've got the same thing going on over here where it's kind of dark up in the front. I need to make a little bit more of my mixture. Again, this is Payne's Gray and Alizarin Crimson. Just watering this down. Okay, and I see that it's kind of dark down at the bottom here. So I'm just gonna put that wash in. And kind of dark over here too. So it's kind of like anchoring all of this growth that's going on right there. Okay, we've also got a little bit of dark, kind of this bit of grass that's coming in here, and it's hugging this edge. See how this edge of the field is kind of glowing? So I actually have to put that in dark up to that edge, and that will make that feel like it's lit up. All right, let's go up into the sky and add some color. And I'm gonna switch to a slightly larger brush as I do that, because that one was a little too small. Let's see, this is number 3. I think I'll use this one. All right. So I'm looking, and the darkest part of the sky is actually up at this left corner. So this cloud is pretty dark up here. And then we've got some kind of brighter blue sky piercing through. So one thing I want to say about clouds is it's easy for you to think, well, clouds are white, so that's going to be brighter. But a lot of times in a sky, the clouds are actually going to be what's darker, because if the light is coming from behind them, they're like kind of in silhouette. So in some places, the light will be shining on the cloud, like right here, and that's where the cloud's really gonna glow. So my best advice with painting clouds is to really go off of what you see and don't go off of what you think you see. Don't paint all the clouds in white. Really look closely at your reference image and compare if the cloud is lighter or darker than the sky behind it. So right down here, by where the sun is piercing through, this cloud is actually pretty dark because it's got the sun coming in from behind it. And then we've got this little bit of cloud here that's dark. And we've got these two little clouds that are actually pretty dark. Now this little span right here is pretty bright. So I'm actually gonna paint around the cloud and make that darker, which will make that edge of the cloud look white. So it definitely flips back and forth. And same thing here, we've got a dark chunk of cloud right here. Another little dark chunk right here. But now here is the edge of the cloud where the cloud is really white on the edge. So I'm going to paint the sky in a little bit darker right there. And then we've got a little bit of extra shadowing right here. And this cloud is kind of dark right here. All right, then we still have a little bit more of this dark cloud that's kind of coming through here. Picks up here behind the silo. Got a dark edge right here behind the top of the barn. All right, and then here we've got a light cloud, got a little bit of dark there. And so, yeah, I think I outlined the bottom edge of it. So I'm painting the background now around this span of light cloud. And I guess I didn't really outline the top of it. Put a little chunk in there. We're just gonna kind of guess that. All right. There's another chunk of clouds right there that I didn't outline. I'm not gonna put it in. I feel like it's too much. So I'm just gonna put some wash into the sky right here, and I'm gonna call that part done. Okay, so this is our first pass, a little bit more of color, right? So we're kind of picking basically like the lighter or the darker half, and we're putting a wash in. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to push the darker areas a little bit darker, which will help me to separate those forms. So I'm going to use the same color recipe, Payne's Gray and Alizarin Crimson, and I'm just going to have less water in it now so that this next pass is going to be a little bit darker, and I'll find those darker areas and wash those in. So we're gonna go back to this post, which we know was kind of one of the darker areas, and this will separate the post from the background by adding this extra pass here. And why don't we do this post right here too, because we know this is really dark. And this edge of the barn here under the roof, that's pretty dark, right? So let's put that in. And we know that the little window is dark. Got another one over here. And it's really dark inside the barn, kind of going around those bales of hay. So I'm just looking for the darkest areas here. A little bit of dark at the edge. Okay, and we've got another little dark window right here and another one right here. So kind of finding these easy to spot anchor points is going to help me as I'm creating to just be able to kind of figure out where things are. So I always pick the shapes that are the easiest to find first, and then I use those as context clues. So it's kind of dark along the edge of the barn here, or down at the bottom, kind of down this span of shadow down at the bottom of the silo. And then this kind of goes to a point right there. Okay, so now in the background, down towards the horizon, this is pretty dark. Got a little clump of trees right there. Pretty dark over here. And it's kind of dark right against the edge of the silo, but really just the left side. Over on the right side, those trees get a little bit lighter, so I think I'm just gonna wash in that left side. And then I mentioned before how the top of the silo is really pretty dark, so I'm going back and pushing that a little bit darker, just kind of towards the top. And I'm still using my larger brush now, so I'm using the number 3. I started with a number 1, but now I'm trying to kind of fill in the areas a little bit quicker. It's kind of dark at the edge here of the roof. And it's kind of dark underneath too. Dark underneath this edge. And right there. And we've got some little bits of dark too in the shadow between where this grass is coming up. Also down towards the bottom. I'm gonna push that a little bit darker. That'll make that feel like it's in the foreground. Okay, so now I'm gonna kind of squint, and I'm just looking to see if I should push any of the sky any darker. I don't really think, well, I take that back. I think I'm just gonna push the very darkest bit of sky, which I mentioned was up towards the top. The rest of the sky feels like it should stay pretty light, because there is a lot of light coming in from the sky. So I think I'm just gonna push a few of these shadows up towards the top, maybe a little bit right there, and maybe this edge of cloud that's in front of the sun there. I think that's it. You know what? We got to put some over here. The sky is pretty dark over there. I kind of missed that. I'm going to wash that in. Okay. I'll put a little bit of shadow in around these pieces that are sticking out. All right, so I think we're pretty good for underpainting. Maybe I'll push this a little darker. Yeah, I'm pushing that barn a little bit darker. It is pretty dark. Okay, now let's go back with straight Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson, but no water. So this is gonna basically make black, okay? So I moved to a new spot on my palette and I'm just using those two colors, and I'm gonna go back over one more time with the very darkest areas. So that's this post right here, and that's gonna pull that out a little bit more. So this is our third pass of the same two colors. And then we want to get this little window in right here, nice and dark, a little bit right there. And inside the barn, we want that to be nice and dark. You can see that's pushing it out. And then we've got this post that's pretty dark, really dark. It's like the darkest. A little bit of anchor point there, and then inside this little window here. Okay, so those are our very darkest areas of the whole piece. And I guess along the edge of the roof here. Okay, it's good. So now we're ready to do an underpainting wash. So I like to do a complementary color underpainting. So that means like opposite on the color wheel. So I'm just going to wash over everything with its opposite. But you want to make sure that all your shadows are nice and dry. So I've got a few little wet areas that I'm just kind of scooping up. Because if this purple color mixes in with our wash, we're going to have some problems. So make sure if you're doing this on your own that you've got those shadows nice and dry. And this acrylic paint, because we're watering it down, it's actually going to dry really fast. So really it just takes like a few minutes or a few more seconds if you need it. I'm going to grab myself a glass of water, and let me know if you guys have any questions while I kind of just let this set up for a few seconds. And I think maybe the sky is dry enough for me to do a wash. So the sky is basically blue and purple. And so kind of opposite color from that would be orange. So I'm going to use my favorite orange recipe. I like to do alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow opaque, which makes kind of a burnt orange. So it's a little bit more muted than if I were to use like Pyrrole red and yellow, which would be like a real neon orange. So for this base, we want it to be, we're gonna go with more of a burnt orange. And I'm watering this down, and I'm just going to wash this in over everything that I've done here in the sky that is going to be blue. So I'm just going right over, and I'm even gonna go over, I'm gonna go over these trees in the background too, because they're pretty much like blue to me. So that kind of works too for the opposite. So we're gonna do all of this with the burnt orange, which again is alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow opaque. That's how I made this recipe. And I just watered it down. And what's going to be interesting using this as an underpainting is we're going to see this color show up in the foreground. So having little bits of it kind of sandwiched into the background is going to look really interesting. It's going to bring some kind of fun unity to the painting. And so that's one of the reasons why I like to do that. It just kind of like harmonizes the layers of the painting. All right, and we're gonna do this right over the roof of the barn too, because that's pretty much a blue tone. So we can use the same underpainting over the roof. Okay, I'm not worrying about going outside the lines here. We're just doing this wash. Okay, so let's pick our next underpainting color. So everything down here like is kind of gold. And so the opposite of gold, which we would really call yellow, is basically like a purple. So I think we're going to do permanent dark violet for the underpainting down on the ground. I guess I already have some. Permanent dark violet is one of my favorite, or permanent dark violet dark, I should say, is one of my favorite underpainting colors from Golden. And it's really just one of my favorite colors that they offer because it's just so intense and fun. Okay, so we're gonna wash this in everything on the foreground. We're not gonna do it over the red part of the barn though. I think we'll do it over the silo. That's kind of just a neutral color. Let's do it over that too. But the red barn, I'm gonna pick more of like a green tone to wash in for that. So we've got a nice base here. So I always get asked a lot, why I do an underpainting, and there are a lot of reasons, but one of them is just covering up the white. So a panel feels a lot less intimidating if you don't have white on it. I think sometimes when you've got a white canvas, it just feels like scary and unfinished. So I just like to get color on it right away because then I feel like it's more accepting to the layers. It actually doesn't even matter what color you put down. Just putting a wash of something is going to make the painting feel more complete right off the bat. So here we go with our purple wash, and now the area that is going to be red for the barn, I'm going to do a thin wash of phthalo green blue shade, which is like a nice emerald green. So I'm gonna wash right over that with my phthalo green. And then we'll be ready to start putting in the actual colors that we see. So I know it looks a little bit crazy in this stage, but just hang with me, it's okay. Okay, so there we go. This is kind of the end of the underpainting, right? So now we're gonna start layering light into this piece. So I think since I washed in the gold sky first, that's probably the most dry. So I think I'll start putting in some of the blue sky. So let's see. We're going to make our blue sky. Where do we want to start? Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to start with kind of these blue tones that it's kind of like this large mass of blue in the background. So I'm going to make my blue using white, and I want to make sure you can see this. Yeah, you can see this color. Okay, so I want to use it, make it using white and a little bit of phthalo blue, but I'm also going to add just a pinch of the permanent violet dark, because that's going to make our blue a little bit more of a periwinkle blue, whereas just the phthalo blue is more of like a green teal blue. So just a tiny pinch of that purple will do the trick. And now in these next layers, I'm not going to thin my paint with water. I'm going to thin it with medium. And I'm using Liquitex matte medium, but you don't have to use this. You can use any acrylic medium, is fine. So I'm thinning this out. Add maybe just a pinch more blue to it. Okay, that looks pretty good. Ooh, I accidentally got a little gold in there. Shoot, it's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna start up here, and I want you to leave little bits of the gold piercing through. It's really hard to do. So really be conscious of that, because we want to leave some of that underpainting, and you can always cover more up later. So just kind of follow along with what I'm doing here, and I'm kind of turning my paintbrush, going in different directions. And I'm also kind of chipping away at some of these outlines. So as I'm going, I'm covering up some of those outlines that I put down. Okay, we've got some of this in between here. Actually went over this bit of white, but we'll add that cloud back in where I have that edge right there. Up towards the right, this gets a little bit darker, so I'm probably gonna mix a slightly darker blue for up there. I'm just gonna continue with this blue. I've got a little window of it poking through this mass of dark clouds here, and we'll put a little bit of it up here too. It's kind of piercing through. Now over here, this is all pretty light. It's not so blue anymore, so I'm actually gonna add a lot of white to my mixture, and I'm gonna put the sky in a little bit, quite a bit brighter over there actually. So same mixture, but I just added more white, and I'm gonna put the sky in really bright right here. And we'll bring it down over here. So I am eliminating some of these clouds that I see, because I don't want to get so carried away in having every little cloud exactly the same. Okay, so that's all the sky there. Now the highlights on these clouds are more of like a yellow highlight, so I'm actually not using this blue for those right now. Put a little bit of this kind of on the edge here of this chunk of clouds. And I'm just gonna use it over here to put this little clump in, even though this is more of like a yellowy cloud. We've got a little highlight here along the edge. Okay. So now I'm gonna go back, like I mentioned, the blue is a little bit darker here and down here. So I'm gonna make my blue a little bit darker. So I'm gonna go back to the same mixing recipe, but I'm gonna add more blue and a little bit more purple. So it's still just phthalo blue, green shade, permanent violet dark, and white, and a little bit of glaze, but we've just got more of the blue and the violet in there now. So this is what's kind of showing up along the edge of the top of the roof here. Put that in. Okay, and we've got some of it is catching this cloud right here. We'll just drop that in. And then up here, it's a little bit darker. I'm doing a lot of squinting to kind of compare my tones. That feels pretty good. So, yeah, there's a lot of color in the sky, but we're gonna get it, guys. We're gonna do this. All right, so these clouds are kind of a purple. So I'm going to find that tone, but it's more of like a muted purple. So I'm actually gonna go back to my Payne's Gray and Alizarin Crimson recipe, and I'm gonna make it with that. So Payne's Gray and Alizarin Crimson and white is going to make my muted purple. I'm gonna add a little glaze in there to let some of my underpainting poke through. And I'm going to use this for the shaded areas of cloud that are up here. So I'm going to drop those in. They're over here. And then when we add the highlights of that are kind of glowing from the sun, it's really going to pop because it's got this nice base of all these other tones. So we're just building up, we're kind of setting the stage to put those highlights in, and then they're really gonna like do some impressive stuff once we've got all this built up. So these are some dark little bits of clouds. Remember we washed these in earlier. Oh, I accidentally connected those two. They're separate, but it's okay. It's kind of like the undersides of the clouds here. Got a little bit of it right here. We got some of that purple coming through over here too. And then this one is dark. That's kind of getting silhouetted by the sun. Who knew there was so much purple in clouds, but there is. All right. Now I think we're ready to do the really fun part where we're going to put that glowing white edge in there. So I'm gonna go back slightly smaller in my brush. I'm gonna go back to my number 3 just to get a little bit more specific here. And I'm going to make this bright white that has some warmth to it. It's got a little bit of yellow. So I'm gonna pick a new spot on my palette. I'm gonna do white, a little bit of Hansa Yellow Opaque, but I'm also gonna do a tiny bit of Pyrrole Red Light, like a really tiny bit, which is going to make it like a warm yellow. But it's gonna be mostly white. And I'm gonna keep this opaque because I really want this white to pop when I layer it on top here. So I'm looking at my clouds and my shapes, and I've got this bright yellow edge along this one here. And we've got some bright yellow coming around that purple. It's really bright right here, and it's kind of piercing through the sky. So these colors are kind of all bouncing around. Like in some places I'm using this color to catch the cloud, and in some places I'm using it to catch the blue sky. There really isn't a lot of like separation. I'm using the same colors, whether it's a cloud or the sky behind it. They're all bouncing around. So this is still just that Hansa Yellow Opaque, Pyrrole Red Light, and white. Mostly white though. A little bit there. We've got these little clouds up here. We've got a chunk of that bright coming through right here and up here. A little bit there. Okay, and then it's really bright where the sun is, of course. So I think I'm actually gonna go right over this circle that I did because I wanna cover that up anyways. That was just kind of like giving me a reference of where it would be. But we don't actually see a circle around the sun. So we wanna kind of cover that up so that it doesn't look like it's outlined. We're just gonna call that the brightest spot. And then we'll probably go back and make it even brighter there, but I'm gonna let this paint set up so that it dries, because otherwise if I add more white, that's just gonna get all mixed together. A little bright along the edge here. I keep seeing these little bits of highlight I wanna include, but I think it's time to move on so we don't get too carried away. I'll put a little bit right there. Okay, so like I said, let's move on. Let's go back to that recipe that we used for the purple clouds here. And I can see it's almost the same color as what we've got on the dark part of the barn, or the dark part of the roof of the barn. It's maybe just a pinch darker on the barn. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more of the Payne's Gray and Alizarin Crimson to it. And I'm gonna put that on the roof of the dark part of the barn. Put a little glaze in there to let it let the underpainting show through. And oh, that's a little too dark. Yeah, a little more light. Sometimes I don't know until I put the color down. So when you're trying to mix colors, don't feel bad if you feel like you have to redo it if it wasn't right, because I have to do that too. It's just sometimes I need to see it in order to really know how it's gonna look. And colors look different when they are on your palette versus on the painting. So, okay, we got that little bit in, and while I've got this on my brush, I kind of see this color down on the ground too. I see it on the edges of this pathway, so I'm just gonna drop some of it in right there, and I see a little bit on the ground right here as well. So I like to use the colors that I've already got on my brush and put them any other places that I see that I can make use of them. So now I'm gonna add a little more white, and put this chunk of the roof of the barn in, because that area is quite a bit lighter actually. So we'll just put that in like one stroke, maybe more than one, but there we go. And I'm still leaving those little bits of the yellow or the orange poking through. And I can see the bottom edge of the roof here feels a little bit lighter, so I'm gonna put a little bit of it there too, because that's gonna separate it from the shadow that's underneath it. Just do a little bit right there. There we go. All right, let's start putting in some of those golden fields. So let's mix up kind of this warm brown tone. Normally I would probably use burnt umber light when I mix this, but I realized I didn't put that in the list of colors for the download for this demo. So I don't want to use any colors that you all don't have. So I'm going to mix it without using brown. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use alizarin crimson, Hansa yellow, and some Payne's gray. So those three colors together will give us the brown that we need. I need a little more alizarin crimson. I really need to buy some more alizarin crimson. I'm running low. It's one of my go-to colors. Okay. And some Hansa yellow. And now we need to lighten it up, so I'm gonna add some white. And I need more yellow. And more white. I think I got a little too carried away with the Payne's gray. I should have done more of just the alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow. So I want it to be more of like an orangey golden tone. We're getting there. A little more yellow. That's looking pretty good, I think. Okay, so we've got this kind of tan orangey tone, and I see this in the background here. So I'm gonna put that right along this edge, and I'm actually covering up the outline that I put in there. Because like I mentioned, we wanna kind of chip away at the outlines. And then I see it kind of along this edge where we put the shadow in. And then in the foreground, I'm kind of just changing up my brush strokes because we can see these bits more clearly. We're seeing the actual texture. So I'm switching my brush strokes to be more up and down. And a little bit right here. Okay, now I need to make it brighter. So I'm going to add more white and more yellow and red. I think I'm gonna move to a new spot on my palette because I'm gonna need a lot more white. So more white, more yellow. Hopefully you guys can see this color. I think you can. Yeah, more white and more yellow probably did it now that I look at it. Okay, so this new color is definitely brighter than what I had before. And I'll use this to kind of separate this next span of color. I'm gonna put a little bit up at the top edge here too. We wanna keep these really level because this ground is flat here, and so we wanna make sure that we get that nice and level. Okay, and then we've got it coming in here. Kind of changing that direction of the brush strokes like I mentioned. Okay. And then we've got that bright area coming around here. And it picks up on the other side of this post, which is gonna make that post feel nice and dark because we've got this bright tone behind it. A little bit coming down. Over here, it's getting kind of bright orangey right there, so I am gonna mix that color next, but I just wanted to get a little bit of this in. Now, the pathway is pretty bright, but it's a little bit more subdued, so I'm actually gonna just put a little bit of glaze in the mixture I was just using and kind of thin my paint out a little bit more, which is gonna let more of that purple show through, and I'm just gonna go over the pathway there and separate that part. All right, that looks pretty good. So now this kind of bright orangey part that I mentioned, we're gonna need to use a different red for that because the alizarin crimson red is too muted to get an orange like that. So I'm actually gonna pick a new spot and I'm going to use my Hansa Yellow Opaque, and I'm gonna use a little bit of Pyrrole Red. It's Pyrrole Red Light that I'm using. And then a little bit of white, and that's gonna give me like this really bright orange tone. Be a little more Pyrrole Red. I'm gonna put a little glaze in there. And yeah, that color is really gonna pop out now because that's a really bright orange. And we see that kind of the underside of the field here, the wheat. I like that color. And I'm gonna make it just, well actually let's put some in over here too. It's not quite as bright over here, but I just wanna put a little bit of that same tone in. And well, we've got it on our palette. Since this is such a nice bright orange, I'm also going to use that to make some kind of rays coming in here from the sun. So we'll probably spruce that up later, but I think that's a good idea. Just put a little bit of that in right there. And I'm gonna add just a pinch more red to it, make it just a pinch darker, and I'm gonna use it to put these little hay bales inside the barn. We'll put a little bit in here too. This one's not quite that color, but I'm just gonna use it anyways for the sake of time. There. Okay. That looks good. We need to do this blue span in the background. That's gonna make things kind of make a little bit more sense when we've got that blue back there. So that's pretty dark. So let's see, we're gonna make that blue from, we're gonna do Payne's Gray and some white. Actually, we need more Payne's Gray. And maybe just a tiny bit of phthalo green because it's kind of a little bit more of like a teal navy blue. I'm gonna put a little glaze in there. I think that'll work. Okay, so I'm gonna put that in, kind of wobbling my brush a little bit at the top edge because it's like the edge of a tree line. And again, we've got this bright light coming down, so I'm gonna just kind of direct my strokes like that. Kind of wobble it right there at the edge of the trees. Okay, pretty dark down there. Now over on this side, I mentioned how the trees are blue, but they get lighter. So I'm gonna add more white to it, and I'm gonna put that little chunk in right there. So we'll do this right here. Yeah, I think that's probably light enough. And actually I see it kind of lighter on the edge of this post too, because the post is really dark and we want to separate that. So I put a little bit of brightness there. I think that works. Okay. So let's see what we want to do next. We haven't done any of like the green grass tone that's in the fields here. So let's mix a little bit of that up. We'll make that green using Hansa Yellow Opaque and a little bit of phthalo green, like the teeniest, tiniest little bit, because phthalo green is crazy intense. And then we're going to mute that with some Pyrrole Red Light. And it's so easy to get carried away and make your green too intense. So you definitely need to have some red in there to tone it down, or it just gets crazy. Okay, so this is kind of a nice olivey green, kind of avocado green, I guess. And we're gonna put some of that a little bit in the foreground here. It's actually already a little too bright. A little bit right there. A little bit over on the other side here. Still leaving little bits of my purple showing. And then we've got maybe a little bit at the bottom of the silo, and then we've got a little stretch of it in the background here, but back here I want to add a little white to it because this is back in the distance. So I'm gonna add a little bit of white to the recipe that I was just using. I'm gonna put that little stretch of green in that's way back here in the distance. There we go. And maybe I'll use this little bit of lighter green to put a little texture in the foreground. Just a couple little bits of highlight there. Not too much. Okay, that works. I think we need to get some color on our silo and on our barn. So let's start with the silo. And I'm gonna peek at our time here. Oh, we're getting close to the end. So you know what, guys? I know I put like these lines through the silo and the little ladder there, but I think I'm gonna ignore those lines. I don't think that it's really necessary, and I might add in the little ladder, but for right now, I'm just gonna put color on the silo. So it's basically like a gray. So we're gonna make it using, we're gonna start with the Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson combo, but then we're gonna also add a little bit of Hansa yellow in there to make it not such a purple. And I've also got some white in there. So it's Payne's Gray, alizarin crimson, Hansa yellow, and white. And our silo is the darkest up at the top. So I'm gonna put that in like this up at the top. And then I'm gonna add some more white to it to make it a little bit lighter towards the bottom. So it's gonna go down here. Get it lighter at the bottom. Okay, there we go. Now let's put some of that red barn in. You know, let's use this little bit that I just made for the bottom of the silo though, and use that to make this post here. And there's the top to the post. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the red is really a very muted red, right? So we're gonna make it from alizarin crimson and white. And I think we'll just put a touch of Pyrrole Red in there, but mostly alizarin crimson and white. And we're just looking for like these little bits of highlight of red. We're not putting this into the shadows at all. I'm gonna put a little glaze in there. I need to switch to my smaller brush to get a little bit more detailed here, because like I said, we're not putting this in a whole lot of places. So it's just this kind of mauve red, I guess. And we'll put it in right here. Still leaving those little bits of the green kind of poking around. Actually, it gets a little bit more of an intense red under the roofline here. So I'm gonna add more of the alizarin crimson and more of the Pyrrole in that area. So it'll have less white make it a little bit deeper of a red. And I'll drop that in kind of under the roof line here. A little bit coming down over here. And I'm definitely simplifying here because we want this to be a quick piece. So even though I actually don't see this color in all these places, I'm just gonna overemphasize, I think, the red in my barn because I want it to show up a little bit more. We've got a little red tone down here. Just gonna drop this red in a few more places, kind of along the edge here. Why not? Put some in there. Okay. Now I think I want to like really push the shadow under the roof a little bit darker. So I'm going to go in with some straight alizarin crimson and just push that in a few places. I guess I have a little bit of white in there. So alizarin crimson's that nice burgundy color. And I'm going to just put that in under the roof line, which will make our roof stand out at us a little bit more. And again, over on this side. And over here. And we're gonna go along the roof line here. Yeah, that's making our barn have a little more impact. Okay. So my silo doesn't feel very round. I feel like I wanna put a highlight on the left side that is brighter. So I'm gonna go back and kind of go back to that same puddle that I was using that I made that gray tone. And I'm going to add more white to it and put kind of that highlight in. So we're just going to make a nice fat stroke there. That's going to make that feel like a highlight. Maybe I'll put another one right there just to give it like some texture. And the top of the silo is actually really dark. I think we need to push the little edge there kind of dark. So let's actually do that with Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson, and maybe no white at all. We're just gonna use like kind of that black recipe and really push that in nice and dark. And while we've got that black on our brush, I'm gonna use that to push my black areas in my barn a little bit darker too, because some of those got a little bit lost. Make those nice and dark. And same thing with my fence post. I want that to be nice and dark. So this is just Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson, and I'm just pushing those dark spots that got a little bit lost. Same thing here with my little post. And when you do make these dark areas darker, it makes the other areas feel brighter. So let's go in and make our sun, because we don't have that, and that really is like a focal point here. Peeking at our time. We're just about 6, but I've got a few more things up my sleeve I want to do here, so we're just gonna push our way through. So let's go in with just straight white, I think. No, I take it back. Let's use white and just barely touch it with a little bit of Hansa yellow. So it's gonna be like this lemon white. And let's put that in where the sun should be. And I'm going to use that same color to push some of the highlights that are kind of bopping around on my clouds here. So this is just white and Hansa yellow opaque. We're just going to layer this so this is nice and opaque. We don't want it to have any glaze in there. We don't want this to be thin. We want this to be really, really intensely bright. So it's like catching the edges of these clouds, making it feel nice and bright. Got some bright ones right here. Okay, so I want to make kind of these like brighter yellow kind of glares coming off of the sun. So my yellow is a little bit contaminated, so I'm going to put some fresh yellow in a new spot here, because if I have any green in there, it's going to kill my color. So I'm going to add some more yellow and red and make these really bright little rays. So this is Pyrrole Red, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and white. And we're gonna bake those, really lay on top of what we've got here. Kind of pull them out. Yeah, that's feeling pretty bright there, I think. I'm gonna add a little bit of white, and I want it to kind of jive with the sun. I don't want that sun to feel so separate from these rays. Because like I said, we don't really see like a exact outline around the sun. So you kind of want that to blend in a little bit with those rays. That's starting to get there. Now the rays get a little bit more like red as they come down. So maybe I'll even make a little orange color that's, oh, I accidentally used my contaminated yellow. I'm gonna make an orange that has a little more red in it and kind of extend some of that shine as it comes down. And I'll use that around here too. Okay, one thing I know is missing is this bright highlight on the field here. It's totally missing, so we need to get that in. And we're gonna use the same recipe, same color recipe, but we're gonna have a lot more white in it now. This is gonna be mostly the white with just a pinch of the yellow and red. And we'll build that up on top of what we've put down. So it's the very brightest right here. And then I'm gonna add a little bit more of the yellow and red in there because it's getting a little bit less bright as I move on to the other areas. So here it's a little bit more of an orangey tone. Pretty bright over here, but still kind of that orangey tone. And same thing over here. We're gonna push that. And that's kind of bringing this foreground closer to us. It's like, it's separating it from the background. You see, I'm not doing the detail of every little branch or piece of hay, or, you know, I'm just kind of picking like the basic forms. Okay. It's getting there. Now I see like a span of this kind of cutting across the background, kind of like right here where it's catching the light. So I'm going to do that nice horizontal stroke right there. Maybe another one up on the next span right here. Put a little bit of this in the sky. All right, I kind of like how that looks. Now I think we're getting close to being done here. One more thing I want to do is I really want to brighten this part of the roof here on the barn because it feels like it's really not catching that bright highlight that I want it to have. So I'm going to push that a little bit brighter. So I'm going to go back to the recipe I was using for that, which was Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson and white. Get a little more alizarin crimson, but I'm going to use more white now. So that will feel brighter. So I just want to push that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. A little bit right on the edge there, maybe. That looks good. These little hay bales inside the barn, I feel like those should be a bit brighter. So I'm going to use a little bit of my Pyrrole Red, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and a little bit of that white. I'm just going to pop those out a little bit more. Those may be too much. I just kind of blotted my brush to get a little bit of that off. It just gave a little dimension there. And you know, maybe we do need the ladder now that I'm looking at it. I feel like for this to look finished, I need to kind of add that back in. So I'm just very lightly going to do that. I'm not gonna worry so much about all the little details of it. So I'll make kind of this neutral dark. I'm gonna do that with alizarin crimson, Payne's gray, a little bit of yellow and white. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit darker than the gray that's on there. But we don't want it to stand out too much or it's just gonna look funny. And I'm not gonna try to paint like every little rung of the ladder perfectly because that's just gonna look weird. So we'll basically make, ooh, I got a little hunk of paint in there. Just kind of put one post there. Kind of maybe anchor my hand here to steady it. I got a little fat there. I'm gonna add some little cross pieces, but not perfect. And then I think I'm gonna like trim that ladder down because I got it a little too fat. So I'm just gonna go back with some of the color that was next to it and trim it down a little. Maybe I'll give a couple little indications of this texture going from side to side. Because maybe it did need just a little bit. And that feels a little bit more like how I want it to look. Okay, just looking at what else I want to include, and I feel like there's a little bit of a pink light going on in the sky, and I haven't really shown that. So I do think I want to include that little bit. And then I promise we will be wrapping this up because I know we're over 6, but you guys know I always go a little bit over. It's okay. So that pink light in the sky, let's make that from Pyrrole Red Light. And I want to make sure you guys can see where I'm mixing. I think you can see over here. Pyrrole Red Light and white. And maybe we'll just add a tiny speck of the Hansa yellow there, but it's going to be more of this pink tone, just a tiny speck of Hansa yellow opaque. But I do like how this is going to look, I think, in the sky, putting some of these warm pink tones. So I see some of this, yeah, kind of the edge of the cloud here. We see some of this pink a little bit over here, and down by the horizon we see some of this pink. This is gonna make it feel more like that warm sunset coming through. So again, this is mostly the Pyrrole Red Light and Hansa Yellow Opaque and white. This is kind of separating this cloud here. Got a little bit of pink. Oh, here we go. It's separating from the silo right there. That was part of the problem, I think. Yeah, that silo needed to have some of that pink wrapping around it. Got a little bit coming through on the back of the, or behind the roof line here. Yeah, like that. Okay, and now maybe I'll just put a few more little pops of red on our barn because I just want to pull that out a tiny little bit. So I'm going to use that Pyrrole Red Light, and I'm going to add it to the same recipe I was just using. So I'm just going to make it more red, and I'm just going to put a few little pops on the barn because I think it'll pull it out and just look nice. So we're going to do, yep, I want it that bright because I think it's going to be fun. But not everywhere, just a few places. This is one of those times, like at the end of the painting, where you just have to decide, what does the painting need? And you don't worry so much about what you see in the painting. When you get to the end, you just want it to work for the painting. And I feel like this needed this brighter pinky red. And I'm gonna put just a pinch of it down here too. Yeah, I like that. And do I want to put a little on the sun? Maybe I will. Yeah, a couple little pieces. That's kind of fun. Okay, last thing, I promise. There's these little bits that are kind of a dark brown, like little bits of texture right there. I'm gonna make that brown with alizarin crimson, Payne's gray, and Hansa yellow, and a little bit of white. And I'm just gonna put a little bit of texture. Oop, that was a little too much right there, because that was kind of outlined and I didn't really address it. And maybe put some of this dark brown down at the bottom here, over here. Yeah, I think we needed some of that, just kind of anchoring things a little bit. And I think we're about ready. Let's see, am I too far over to keep going? Yeah, I'm too far over. We're gonna call this one done. All right, it was a lot to paint, but I appreciate you guys hanging out with me through this one. I'm gonna post my completed painting for you to check out, and I cannot wait to see the ones that you guys paint. So if you don't know about my group, Allie's Paint Friends, that's where everybody posts their paint-along paintings afterwards. So check out my free group, Allie's Paint Friends, if you are not in it. And you'll see everybody's barn paintings in there. And if you paint it with me, make sure you post yours in there too, because everybody really likes to see it. I forgot to ask you guys, I usually try to remember this in the middle of the demo, but if you've enjoyed this demo, would you please hit that share button? It helps me so much because it allows a lot more people to see my demos. And I would love if you do share it, just drop that into the comments, say I shared it, because otherwise I am not able to say thank you. Facebook doesn't always tell me who shares it. So please share it and say that you shared it in the comments. Thank you so much. I'm gonna give you a little close up of how it turned out. Got a bit of a glare on the iPad, but if you have the download, you've got the reference image and you can go off of that. Thank you, Tammy, for sharing it. I appreciate it. Okay, you guys have a great night and I will see you next week. I haven't told everybody yet what we're doing next week, but this is the last landscape demo and I've got something special up my sleeve next week. So if you're on my email list, be watching for that email that'll come out on Friday. All right, you guys have a great night. Take care. Bye.